Good morning, everybody, to Simple Handicap for Monday, December 31st. Thank you for making me a part of your morning. A very happy New Year's Eve to everybody out there listening to the podcast this morning. If you found time in your holiday day to make me part of your morning, I appreciate it very much. This is the last podcast this week until Friday morning. We'll do an update and catch everybody up on everything that is going on. No podcast tomorrow, no podcast Thursday morning, unless we see a ton of movement in these numbers. Otherwise, I'll wait till Friday to do the last update of the week. We'll be doing a live stream on Thursday, so keep an eye out for that over from the Twitter feed. If you want to get involved with the final couple of plays down the stretch, I would expect 2 to 3 more releases from the service between now and the Super Bowl. You can head over to www.raspicks.com to get all of the details to join in. You'll probably at most see one this week, potentially 0, and then you'll see probably 1 from the wild card weekend, 1 from the divisional round, and then 1 more in the final 2 weekends as well, whether that's the conference championship or the Super Bowl. We'll see how things shake out. But there's probably 2 to 3 more releases. If you're curious in joining in for the home stretch, www.raspicks.com. All right, lots to get to, lots to talk about. We'll do an update after what we talked about late Sunday night, yesterday morning. For those of you listening on the podcast feed, we'll give you a market rundown to get you on your way this New Year's Eve morning on Tuesday. Starts off on Sunday with the Saints on the road at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This got as high as 14 for Tampa Bay. Win, and they get the South. But yesterday there was a release from a group that pushed this number down. There was also a release from another pro that took out the 14s. And so 2 releases on the Saints at 14. We're now at 13 at circa. Total from 43.5, holding steady. Still don't know the status of a couple of the Saints offensive players, but we do know both of these teams obviously pushing forward with anyone that they have healthy, ready to go for this game. Massive game for Tampa Bay. PointsBet certainly reflects that. Buffalo Bills on the road at the New England Patriots. This is now Bills -3, -105. Was as low as -1 when doing the podcast Sunday night, and the Bills money has come in for 2 reasons. Number 1, Josh Allen and the starters will play at least some portion of time. My thought in this is they probably play for the first quarter, potentially a little bit less. I think that's the long range that you can see Josh Allen and starters playing in this game. Reason number 2, there is growing uncertainty about Drake May starting in this game. It is expected, according to some accounts that cover the team, that Joe Milton will be activated and could get a chance to play in this game, as well as a chance to start. It's an ongoing situation that we discussed on Sunday evening on the live stream coming ahead of things. The word yesterday officially was that Joe Milton has a good chance at being activated for Sunday's finale against the Bills. So Bills starters will go. Joe Milton potentially could replace Drake May. Pats will get the number 1 overall draft pick if they lose this game. Chicago on the road at the Green Bay Packers. Packers still 9-point favorites across the board. Total from 42.5 down to 40. No official word yet from the Green Bay Packers on what they plan to do. There has been a couple of accounts who have speculated on what is going to happen. Matt LaFleur, when posed with the question, said it is his intention to win every game. And there were a couple team accounts that speculated that they would expect to see the Packer starters play in this game. This number is not reflective of 100% effort from the Packers. We would have got a bigger number even coming off of the loss. The Bears defense looked a lot better against Seattle. There were some quotes post-game that led you to believe that they were buying in a little bit more. Obviously, a few extra days to prepare for what's left in this game. Total from 42.5 down to 40. Perhaps just about, I would say, 5 to 10% less price point here on the Packers that it probably should be, and we're seeing the total reflect that a little bit as well. Miami on the road at the New York Jets. A little bit of Jets money into the market. 2.5's gone. We're down to Miami -1. Total from 41.5 down to 39 flat. Tua's status still very much in doubt for this game. As I talked about Sunday night, and we heard again yesterday from Mike McDaniel, the word surgery was chucked around in regards to Tua's injury. It wasn't said that he needs surgery, but it was referenced that it was not something that was required, which typically leads anyone to believe that the injury is a little bit more certain. Jalen Waddle will play in this game, but it could very well be another Huntley game for the Dolphins. Whether or not Huntley goes is going to have an impact on this game from this current price point. I think of 2.5 points that would take this to Miami, 3.5 if Tua does start. That's a big adjustment, but it's an adjustment that we have seen happen a couple other times this season, including last week. Jets turmoil continues to boil over. DJ Reed is asking to hit free agency immediately beginning after this game concludes, so he's already kind of sealed his fate. There's the Sauce Gardner news that has come out with some of the tweets. Garrett Wilson requesting a trade. It has been horrible in the news cycle for the Jets all season, fairly. But yesterday specifically, out of that game against the Bills, just more bad news coming out about the state of that locker room. You start to wonder just how much is left here for the Jets. We'll hear a little bit more from Aaron Rodgers, but anything that he said post-game 2 was very damning as well for the state of this locker room. Cleveland on the road at the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens out to 18-point favorites. No number posted at Circa nor Buckeye this morning. 42.5 holding steady as the total across the screen. Now, with the Saturday game in Pittsburgh being played, obviously, after this game, the Ravens do have potentially... it's tough to say that they have more motivation as an 18-point favorite. Obviously, a very one-sided matchup, but not knowing what the status of the Steelers game is going to be would lend you to believe that you are going to get at least a full effort for the first half from the Baltimore Ravens in this game. Kansas City on the road at the Denver Broncos. Last time we talked, it was Denver -9. It is now Denver -10, -115. Total 39.5 down to 38.5. The reason that the Broncos number continues to push out is because the news for the Chiefs continues to look like they're going to play even deeper down the depth chart than immediately expected. Chris Olajuwon is going to get time in this game. Zach Stevens, the Denver Broncos reporter, was saying that not only is Mahomes not going to play, but he is expected to be called up and play in this game as well. So it's going to be Wentz in all likelihood starting for the Chiefs, but it could potentially be a 2-quarterback game for Kansas City in this matchup. Obviously a very important game for the Denver Broncos, needing the win to keep their playoff hopes alive. LA Chargers on the road at the Las Vegas Raiders. Chargers sitting at 5.5 with Circa out to -6. Harbaugh did 2 interviews yesterday, one official, one was with Belichick on a podcast where he was talking about how difficult it is to sit starters, and he was talking about how important seeding is to the Chargers in this game. He said the plan will be to win, and even if Pittsburgh wins, the Chargers can't gain anything as seeding. That is the one time in the interviews where he said that he was going to think about it because he's not going to get into all the hypothetical scenarios. So, with that said, what you're looking at for the Chargers in this game specifically is if the Pittsburgh Steelers lose and the Chargers can win and get the 5 seed to then take on the Houston Texans instead of possibly going in to have a rematch with the Baltimore Ravens, you're probably going to see a much bigger effort out of the Chargers if the Steelers lose than if the Steelers win and the Chargers are locked into the 6. It sounds like Harbaugh may approach this game a little bit differently. So some correlation in this game to the Pittsburgh-Cincinnati game playing on Saturday evening. Keep an eye out for those moneyline parlays with some of those correlations if you're looking at playing those as an option this week. Jacksonville on the road at the Indianapolis Colts. Colts still holding steady at 5, left to right across the screen. Total from 44.5 up to as high as 46 at Circa. Some interesting back and forth about Shane Steichen and his job. Really tough for me to get a read on what the locker room is kind of buying into and what they're thinking about. Pat McAfee again yesterday taking shot at the Colts, which Steichen had to defend. It seems like a very awkward final game for Steichen, for ownership, with how the locker room is somewhat fractured, it seems like, on how the players are responding to some of these comments as well. I'm having a hard time trying to understand and make of it, just as I am with the Jags, quite honestly, and what we're going to expect from their final game, likely with Peterson as the head coach. So this is a tough one to kind of read between. Obviously, both teams eliminated. We are seeing a little bit of Jags money come into the market as some of these 5.5s are taken out, but certainly over has been the choice so far. Carolina on the road at the Atlanta Falcons. Falcons 8-point favorites across the board with a total of 47.5. Bryce Young will start for the Carolina Panthers. Still very unclear about who is going to actually be healthy on the defensive side. Waiting to see what that looks like because it sure did not look good against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Atlanta Falcons need a win and a Buccaneers loss. These games will be played concurrently. So you're going to get an effort out of the Atlanta Falcons and that offense, which looked very good in the first half against the Washington Commanders. Again here against another bottom-tier defense like they have faced with Penix the last 2 weeks. Washington on the road at the Dallas Cowboys. Dan Quinn said that seeding for the playoffs is really important. We're going to fight like hell to keep it. Washington currently has the 6th seed, and they need a win in this game to stay there. So it is a big game for Washington, according to Dan Quinn. They are 4-point favorites on the road at the Dallas Cowboys. Total from 45.5 down to 44. Is this going to be the final game for Mike McCarthy in Dallas? Yesterday, Jerry Jones says after the game, he will announce his decision on what's happening with McCarthy. Cincinnati Bengals on the road at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Saturday night game, Bengals were as high as 2.5-point favorites. This is now down to 1.5 for the Bengals. Total 48.5 down to 48. Joey Porter Jr. expected back for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That is significant in the defensive backfield for that secondary, especially so in this matchup. Chase Brown's status very much in question for the Cincinnati Bengals in this game. There was a lot of hype for Herbert in a presser yesterday, which is kind of a damning sign for the status of Chase Brown, who's very much in doubt to play in this game on Sunday. Seattle Seahawks on the road at the LA Rams. Seahawks holding steady as 3-point favorites. Total in this game is 39. Two interesting notes that we saw yesterday from the LA Rams. Jordan Rodriguez, who covers the team and is very well connected, retweeted an article that she wrote in August predicting that Jimmy Garoppolo would start at least one game this season for the LA Rams. Odd timing to do that. She also highlighted how in that piece she projected it could be the final week game against Seattle with the Rams clinching the division. Exactly the scenario that the Rams are in. Does she know something? Perhaps. Another interesting note that was kind of referenced, but perhaps was not talked about as much as it should be. Sean McVay, twice in his tenure with the LA Rams, has been in the same scenario that he is in this week, where he has clinched a playoff spot and has not been confirmed with the seed that he is going to get. So playoff is clinched, seed is irrelevant at the moment. I mean irrelevant from an unconfirmed standpoint. That's the wrong word. Bear with me. It's New Year's Eve. Doesn't know the seeding, but has the playoff berth clinched. Same spot he's in now. Those other two times in the past, he has sat all of the starters and not treated it as a must-win game. He's prioritized rest the final week in the two spots earlier in his career that are the same spot that he is in this game. Doesn't need to be referenced how often he sits guys in preseason, and I don't think it needs to be overstated that guys like Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford perhaps, and the offensive line really could benefit from some rest as well. So all signs are pointing to the Rams resting their starters. No official announcement yet. That would be my bet at the moment, that they would be resting their guys. Now, this number at Seattle -3, I would say is accounting for that almost entirely. I think if we see the official announcement hit, this would push up towards Seattle 4.5. Mike McDonald has said that everybody is playing. Geno Smith has some massive incentives from a financial standpoint in this game, as big as any player that I've seen in the final week. They're not going to have prop impact per se, as some of the yardage and completion numbers are far less than what he is going to be lined at. But there is certainly a lot of upside for Geno to have a big game in this game, and he may get to see a ton of Rams backups on the other side of the field. San Francisco on the road at Arizona. This game is off of the board. Brock Purdy, I would expect not to play in this game the way that he left the game against Detroit with suspected nerve issues to the same elbow that he had surgery on a couple of seasons ago. The look on his face, how Shanahan spoke about it postgame, sounds quite concerning. Some of the Twitter doctors speculating it is going to be a swelling issue that could go down later in the week, given that it is week 18, and we saw San Francisco, kind of lay it all out there against the Lions. The pregame speeches from Warner and how they came out red hot in that game before faltering in the second half. I think that was kind of it for San Francisco. If this is a Josh Dobbs game, there is that connection that he has to Arizona. Not overly significant, but This is probably a game where we saw what he can do with the offense. You're probably still going to get skill guys for San Francisco. It's going to be a downgrade, but in a meaningless game, if you will, with both of these two teams eliminated, being played indoors. I don't hate the prospect of Josh Dobbs having a decent game and a decent showing here for the 49ers. And on the other side, there hasn't been an announcement for what the Cardinals are going to do, but you kind of like them as an over partner somewhat as well. So I'm curious to see how low this total may reopen if we get the news that Purdy will in fact miss. Houston on the road at the Tennessee Titans, down to a pick'em. Now, this was the game that I talked about and kind of circled on the Sunday night live stream. I was saying, look, there was nothing from Houston at all that suggested that they were sitting starters, and this game was being priced about 10 points off of what the last week number would be, basically anticipating that the Texans were going to sit everybody. In fact, it was confirmed yesterday that D'Amico Ryan said that they're going to play anybody who is healthy. Houston has to find something on offense and get right. Can they do it against Tennessee is another question, but whether or not guys will play has now been answered. So the Texans are going to play their guys. It was a 5.5-point move. We're down to a pick'em. As mentioned, the last week number in this game would have been Houston minus 5.5 on a neutral. You would have given Tennessee a bit of a home field advantage. And so like we're seeing with a lot of teams this week, this is sort of 75 to 80% of the way of what the number should be, with that tail on the back end expecting perhaps if a game is out of reach, you're going to see guys sitting. So we're not all the way back to what this, in theory, should be, if you will, but certainly a big correction here with Houston playing all of their guys. Minnesota on the road at the Detroit Lions. Detroit 2.5 minus 122 is the number at FanDuel, minus 118 at DK, 3 even money at Caesars. Bet online 2.5 minus 120. Total at Pinnacle last night after the game got as high as 58.5. We saw an opener of 53.5. It was a 5-point move. Tons of over money into the market, and 58.5 was the stopping point. We're seeing 57 at DK, 57.5 at FanDuel, 57.5 at Pinnacle this morning. All signs point to a very high-scoring game here in Detroit. And then it is the final game on rotation. The New York Giants on the road at the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles a 3-point favorite across the board with a total of 38. The news in this relates to the Adam Schefter tweet yesterday, who said that he would be floored if Saquon Barkley plays in this game for the Eagles. Interesting comment given the rushing record, but also an indication that perhaps Barkley is going the way of A.J. Brown, who in the post-game interview on Sunday said that he has earned the right to sit. We're certainly not going to see Jalen Hurts. This number, about 12 points different from last week's number. Even with the Eagles playing at home, you can make the case it's a little bit more. It is certainly being priced like everybody for the Eagles is sitting. I think the bigger question is who is going to start, McKee or Pickett, given Pickett has the rib injury. That'll do it for me today. I hope everybody has a fantastic Tuesday. I hope you have an amazing New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. I'll be back with a final catch-up for Week 18 and the final NFL market rundown of the NFL regular season later this week.